around possibilities on this Friday, end of August, and it has to do with how when you're in a historical event, you probably didn't know you were, probably couldn't describe it. And I don't know why this idea came up to me in the context of George Washington. I don't know. Maybe it's because I just saw Hamilton. I don't know. It could be that. But the idea that when Washington and the troops who were literally fighting the revolution at the time were fighting it, they probably had very little idea exactly what it was that they were doing when they were standing around in the middle of winter wrapped in blankets with no shoes on. They probably weren't thinking people are going to look back at us and think this was the coolest thing that ever happened, or this is like one of the most important things that happened. And literally, as you think, and I don't know why war, because this couldn't really apply to anything, but in the context of this specific example, if you think about battles and war, we think about them as these concrete, discrete events, like this is what happened now. The folks who were involved in them, I can't, as I imagine, what it might have been like for them. I'm sure they weren't thinking this is the battle of blah 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 blah, because they were just like trying to survive. And so the idea that in some ways, what we're experiencing now, in the face of everything that's going on, seems like, it's everything's chaos and everything's crazy, and we don't the purpose, the things that we were doing in the past, like for example, whether it's performance or certain types of work or jobs or levels of making money or just being able to go to the grocery store without really thinking about it very much. This is not that anymore, and so we're in this place of we don't really understand what's happening. There's no kind of firm ground to stand on, and yet that firm ground really comes from us in contemplating what I personally do is the next right step. So where I am right now and what the next right step is for me is kind of the firm ground that's available. And in some ways, it's the only firm ground that's available. And in some ways, it's the only firm ground that ever was available. The notion that certain things happen in certain ways and always will was not really reality in the first place. And we know that now, right? Because of what's happening now, right? So this is evidence of that, that this notion of continuity really wasn't the way that things were going to go. And so we just had a wider band of lack of continuity. Now it's a smaller band of lack of continuity, so it's a little bit more obvious. But thinking about this idea that what's happening right now, when we look back at it, may have some very clear, specific meaning and importance and intent, and that the specific things that we're doing, we could look back at them and go, oh, I understand why I was doing that then. This notion that, what were you doing during this time and how they're going to carry that forward. One of the things that I do in the work that I do is kind of consider this possibility of sort of projecting ourselves forward a couple of years and thinking about what we would say looking back about what we're doing right now. Are we holding the family together? Are we taking care of the basics so that the next thing can happen? Are we ensuring that we're making sure that the house isn't going to fall down, or that we're doing whatever we need to do to connect people so that they're connected in a way that's completely different now because old connections aren't available right now? Or all these sorts of things are ways to think about what's happening now that's completely different than 8 months ago, than 6 months ago. I guess it's more like 9 months ago now, isn't it? but yeah, and so a rethinking of sort of what now is and how we evaluate how we are in now, and that this has the thing about what was going on with George Washington and those folks who were involved in the revolution is that had never happened in their lives before in their experience. These are not people who kind of bopped from revolution to revolution, kind of doing the revolution thing. Although, I don't know, some of them might have been from France. I don't know. Even if they were, it would be a completely different thing. Way older culture, way different situation. The king was there. Lots of reasons, not important reasons, but thinking about how these epic events that happen in our lives, in lots of ways, are epic because they've never happened before. And so when we're in them, our way to kind of position ourselves in them requires a kind of a openness to novelty, because there's not been something like that before. So anyway, something to think about if you're in a space where you're sort of frustrated or lost or don't really understand kind of who you are now, because in the past, who you are was based on the specific things that you were doing that was rooted in a way of being that's not really happening right now. That who you are now could also be thought about in the context of what exactly you are doing right now in the space that you are in right now, and what the next right step for you is in the concrete context of exactly what's happening in your life right now, as opposed to these larger things that we kind of got connected to and embedded in the past. So something to think about for Possibility Friday. This is What's Next with Dr. Joel. I'm Dr. Joel, and I will be back tomorrow with some information about something, and I don't even know what it is yet. I'm sure I'll figure it out before then. See you then.